Welcome to Media Path. I am Louise Palanker.
And I'm Fritz Coleman.
And it is our honor and privilege to be your tour guides today as we venture down a path lush with freshly blooming media. Our guest coming up is the great and gifted comedian Dwayne Perkins, whom you may have seen all over your streaming media or on stage in your own town back in the olden times of public gathering. So get yourself seated, pour yourself a 2-drink minimum, and you won't even need a friend to make a lovely toast to our health and happiness. But first, Fritz, what have you been enjoying media-wise this week?
I got a couple of cool things. I have one book and one movie. The first is a Netflix film called The Dig.
Yep.
This stars Carey Mulligan and Ralph Fiennes. It's based on a true story from 1939. And that true story gave birth to a novel by John Preston that this film is based on. It's about large burial grounds in Suffolk, England, which are the site of 2 medieval cemeteries. And they're part of a property inherited from her deceased husband by Edith Pretty, who was played by Carey Mulligan. She decides to hire an archaeologist, Basil Brown, played by Ralph Fiennes, in order to see what's in these mysterious mounds. And that's all I'm giving away. But The Dig, which is a term for an excavation site, contains an amazing treasure trove of historical items. It's beautifully shot, just amazing cinematography. It's a quaint and it's a thoughtful story at a time when I need me some more quaint and thoughtful as opposed to dark and threatening. Right. And I love it because it's a true story. I love the way it makes us remember that all humans are connected to all mankind back through the ages.
Right. And it's also The Dig, this time period, I hope I'm not giving away too much, it's happening on the brink of World War II in 1939 in Great Britain. So it's the urgency to retrieve from the earth what may be there before all is destroyed is present as well. And yet it's a very still and thoughtful film. Yep.
And it's an acting masterclass. I could watch Ralph Fiennes do a Portuguese translation of a Dr. Seuss book and be happy because the dude is, I wish he did more films. He's really great.
Yeah, he's wonderful.
How about you?
Oh, what have I been watching? Okay, so I found a lovely path intersection paved by Laura Ingalls Wilder, a fine pioneering woman who grew up in a series of Little House books. We begin with the book. So first there's a book about Laura Ingalls Wilder. It's called Prairie Fires, The American Dreams of Laura Ingalls Wilder, and it's by Caroline Fraser. This is the first comprehensive historical biography of Laura Ingalls Wilder, the beloved author of the Little House books. Millions of readers of Little House on the Prairie believe they know Laura Ingalls Wilder, the pioneer girl who survived blizzards and near starvation on the Great Plains, and the woman who wrote the famous autobiographical books. But the true saga of her life has never been fully told before. So now, drawing on unpublished manuscripts, letters, diaries, and land of financial records, Caroline Fraser, the editor of the Library of America edition of the Little House series, masterfully fills in the gaps, revealing the grown-up story behind this influential childhood epic of pioneer life. She also chronicles Wilder's tumultuous relationship with her journalist daughter, Rose Wilder Lane, setting the record straight regarding charges of ghostwriting that have swirled around the books over the years. So daughter Rose is described in this book as instrumental in getting her mother's work edited and published, but her personality presents here as a challenging brew of bipolar and borderline personality disorders with generous helpings of depression and narcissism. After years and years of struggle and bare subsistence, the death of her parents and the Great Depression finally spur Laura in her 60s to capture and hold the strength and spirit of her family in the pages of her books. The stories soften the difficult and desperate edges of her hard, scrabble, rootless childhood by depicting danger and hardship as adventure and perseverance and as a celebration of the pioneer spirit. And much like Laura's Little House books soften her history, so too does the PBS American Masters look at Laura Ingalls Wilder. So I recommend that you read the book first and then watch the PBS American Masters. Daughter Rose is depicted here as more eccentric than mentally ill, and the Little House books are more a version of the truth than a rewriting of personal history. But it's still fun to watch the book come to life, visit the various homesteads, all now museums, and hear historians and readers who treasure these books talk about them in depth and with so much love. And so
let me ask you a question. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Was Little House on the Prairie the first
Right.
time that her work was translated to television?
Yes. So it's this crazy story. So the first book in the series is actually Little House in the Big Woods, but Little House on the Prairie may be the next one. But what happened was her daughter Rose inherits this gold mine of that, ironically, her good daughter trying to be a writer her whole adult life and finally strikes it rich off of her mother's writings. But she's like this kind of crazy political libertarian, like fiercely at odds with everything democratic. And she kind of like has this court of young people around her who also adhere to her kind of odd political beliefs. And she winds up bequeathing it to this one strange dude, libertarian dude. And he's the guy who, like in the 70s, sold the rights to the series to a guy named Ed Friendly, who got involved with Michael Landon, or Michael Landon got involved and pushes Ed Friendly out. And anyway, the Little House series then takes off.
Very cool.
Yeah, but it didn't happen until the 70s.
Yeah, that was a huge show, number one on primetime television for 5 or 6 years.
And then they go ahead and take poetic license with the whole story as well. They have the whole family living the entire time in Walnut Grove, when actually Charles Ingalls was pretty itinerant. He was moving constantly, and he was never really able to put a farm together that was able to sustain the family because there were just so many problems. It was locusts and, dust and heat, and it was a rough life.
Very cool. And when's the American Masters series, or has that been on already?
I think you can find all of this stuff if you get like a streaming service to all of the PBS documentaries, which I have. So I would say just kind of like speak it into your remote and see what's available to you. The other thing I like to do to find something is if you just Google the name of something, it will usually tell you where you can watch it.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Well, my second suggestion is about a hero of mine, Mike Nichols. And there's a great new book about his life called Mike Nichols, A Life. It's a biography written by Mark Harris. Now, Mike Nichols, a brilliant comic, a film and theater director, a producer, an actor. He's won everything, Oscars and Tonys and Emmys. And he was a wonderkind. He was in his 20s when he had that run on Broadway, An Evening with Mike Nichols and Elaine May. He directed his first Neil Simon play, Barefoot in the Park, in 1963 when he was 32. He was 35 when he directed one of the most complicated pieces of theater turned to film, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. 36 when he directed The Graduate, one of the greatest films of all time. By his mid-30s, he had a 3-story penthouse on Central Park West, drove a Rolls Royce, and included among his friends Jackie Kennedy, Elizabeth Taylor, and Leonard Bernstein.
Oh.
I mention this not to say that all those trappings are what makes someone successful. It's just a sign of how brilliant this guy was at such a young age. And he went on to direct Carnal Knowledge and Silkwood and Working Girl, The Birdcage, which was written by Elaine May. He directed Tony Kushner's masterpiece, Angels in America, for HBO. This is a wonderful book, especially if you have curiosity about this brilliant man. It's not always a pleasant picture, but it's honest. It's filled with success and failure. Nichols always craves stability and insecurity and status, probably having to do with his father dying when he was 12 years old and they escaped Nazi Germany in the early 30s. He was always a lonely outsider. He had serious bouts with depression and self-medication. It's a great piece of work, Mark Harris's book, about one of the great minds of American movies. And Harris interviewed about 250 people, including a lot of your favorite stars, for this book. Really a fantastic read.
And there's also an HBO documentary on Mike Nichols now that I have not yet seen. But
and then there was also an American Masterpiece, a PBS special about him as well. He's a brilliant guy, one of those people that just has conquered so many different playing fields.
Yes, and I have one more American Masters to tell you about.
All right.
Before we introduce our guests. This one is called Marian Anderson, The Whole World in Her Hands. This installment of American Masters tells the story of legendary contralto Marian Anderson, a ground-shattering African-American woman who became an international sensation in the early 20th centuries, and in her quiet, capable, and dignified way, she carved a vision of the civil rights movement in the 1930s. Marian Anderson was honored as the first African-American to sing in the White House, And when she sought to perform in Washington's Grand Constitution Hall, owned by the Daughters of the American Revolution, she was refused because of her race. So First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt was appalled by the ban and resigned her membership from the Daughters of the American Revolution in protest. Answering this racial assault, the FDR administration invited Marian Anderson to sing from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. These images are now iconic. On Easter Sunday, June 9th, 1939, Marian Anderson performed what has justly been called the concert heard around the world before 75,000 people and millions more over a live radio broadcast. The concert had a profound effect on the country and on a 10-year-old Martin Luther King Jr. who heard her on the radio. He went on to invite her to sing at his March on Washington 24 years later. So the announcement that her image will be joining Martin Luther King Jr. and Eleanor Roosevelt on a newly designed $5 bill, that has reawakened her story and interest in her life. So hopefully those $5 bills are coming, and also Harriet Tubman on the 20, which is what I would really like to see. So now Dwayne Perkins is an American stand-up comedian from Brooklyn, New York, currently residing in Los Angeles. He has appeared on Conan, Comedy Central, and as a regular correspondent on The Jay Leno Show. In August 2012, he was selected by Rolling Stone magazine as one of their 5 comics to watch. So,
hey, Dwayne.
Welcome, Dwayne.
Hey, thank you for having me. That was a pretty nice intro. It's good to be here, guys. And we all go way back, so it's really nice to be here with you. Yes,
we are Laugh Factory, I guess, graduates.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. And so what I want to know from you, it's like my first question out of the gate is like, what makes a person funny?
That's a really good question. I think because there's so many different ways to actually execute being funny, I think it comes down to just an innate understanding of the truth and of yourself, how you fit into that truth. I think even a little when you're like in second grade and you fall down to make someone laugh, or you make milk come out of your nose. There's something there about the timing and knowing how it's going to affect people. Mm-hmm. And then as you grow older, it's just a matter of kind of being the first person to see the holes in things. Not that every comic and every form of comedy needs to be sort of like pointing out the truth, but there's always anything funny usually has some kernel of truth in it. Even a person slipping on a banana peel, because the truth of that is that sometimes we celebrate people falling down.
Our imperfections can be amusing. Right. Also, sometimes it's like something subtle that you see in a child, like the raise of an eyebrow or the understanding of sarcasm.
Exactly.
Like the earlier your child says something sarcastic, the funnier she's going to be.
That is 1,000% true. I remember when I was in 6th grade, I did a performance of The Wiz. I played the Scarecrow, and The Wiz is obviously sort of like the black sort of version of Wizard of Oz, right?
Sure.
And we were rehearsing, and like the girl who was playing Dorothy came out too early, and so like she came out, and the Tin Man and Scarecrow weren't there, and I remember saying, I just said something like, "What, did you go to Oz by yourself?" And the other kids laughed. And that just wasn't a joke I don't think most of my classmates would have made. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure. No, for sure. They would not have. That was fast.
And that laugh was good to you.
Yeah, and the laugh was good to me as well. And I think that's a lot of it too, Fritz. I'm glad you mentioned that. There is an element of, we can all be funny, just like we can all sing, but we all can't be Barbra Streisand, right? Mm-hmm. That's a matter of talent and wanting to be Barbra Streisand, like working at it to be that good. And once you get your first laugh, I remember being in a bodega in Brooklyn, and I bought something for my grandma, and I smiled, and I think the guy in the bodega said something like, your teeth are so white, which was, maybe I was decent at brushing, even though I had, admittedly, I've had some, like, as a kid, it was up and down, but this was, I guess,
it was a good week.
Yeah. And he said, your teeth are so white. And this was, I wasn't trying to be funny. This is just me being completely honest. I said, yeah, but my gums are black. And everyone laughed. And then I was like, then you learn, oh, sometimes you're funny when you're not even trying to be funny, just the truth of something. So I remember every time, like when I would make people laugh, it would, there was a rush there. And then, but I didn't think of being a comic right away because, you just don't know, you go to school, it's like you want to be a police officer, a fireman, like no one, there's no comic coming into school when you're young, so.
It would make school more entertaining if that happened more often.
It would. And I remember as an Angelino, I went to a high school once and that was kind of cool talking to the kids.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
You have a quality over and above your humor, which is fantastic. I recommend people watch your Drybar special. But you have a quality, and that is, and I attribute the same quality to people like Carson and people like Arsenio Hall, which is you have a great warmth. Your character on stage, which is just an extension of your character in real life. You have a great warmth. So I'm already in your tent before you start giving me your life philosophy. I always thought that was Arsenio's greatest talent. And I mean this with the greatest respect because he's my friend. But if you looked at his act written out on a piece of paper, it would not make you laugh like S.J. Perlman would make you laugh.
Right.
But he's so warm and so inviting on stage that he just wins you over before he opens his mouth. And I really think that you have that quality too. You're so comfortable on stage and it's a huge plus for you. That's something you can't teach people. It just comes out of your natural chemistry.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And Arsenio was one of my guys growing up and still is. And so that's a great compliment. I think, when you watch Arsenio and that, I guess in his history, he was raised in the church, he was a magician. And I don't know, some combination of all these things, I think he's a drummer too. It just leads to his timing and his comfort. Yeah. And I think,
looks like he's having a good time. He's always smiling and you just can't not like him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it goes back to I relate a lot of things to sports. Not that I was like a super athlete or anything, but sports can be such a metaphor for life if applied correctly. And I think, you can know how to play a game and you can know the X's and the O's. And there's always this sort of other element of timing, of knowing when to break the rule, and I think my likability is something that I accept. I'm really happy about it. But sometimes sometimes it does trouble me because I'm like, is this joke that funny? Or is it just, you shouldn't look gift horse in the mouth, but sometimes you want to be like, is this joke
50% of it is whether they like you or not. You should be glad you have that. And the truth about it is you can't manufacture that. If people have an innate sense that you're creating some character for their benefit on stage, but you're not, you're very real. And I think that's the approachable part of it.
But if I could say from reading through your book of essays, Hot Chocolate for the Mind, where you don't see a likable person on the stage, you're simply just reading the words, you do have a real gift with language. Mm-hmm. And it's a ton of fun to read just like, it's like like I'm following you through your day and all of the things that would get a raised eyebrow out of you're pulling out a notebook and you're writing about. And it's just really enjoyable.
Oh, thank you so much. And that was, that was the goal. And I think the title is a play obviously on the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. Sure. That book basically is like, it goes back to, I started a blog in the sometime in the aughts. I think that's what we call it, the aughts.
Yeah, right? Well, now we are, sure. Not during them, but in retrospect, why not?
Yeah. And it was on MySpace. That's how far back it goes. And I just remember people, I didn't know what, where it started too is David Sedaris is one of my favorite authors.
Yes.
And like I've read, it's so great to hear you guys talk about books. I don't think people read enough. And I certainly, in my formative years, did not read enough. I read what was assigned, and I read a little bit for enjoyment. But as an adult, I try to read a lot more. I'm sort of backfilling. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading David Sedaris and like laughing out loud, like I was at a comedy show, and I just couldn't believe. Like I didn't think that level of gut-wrenching laughter was possible. And with Hot Chocolate for the Mind, I'm not necessarily going for that. But he definitely inspired me so that's why I started a blog. And then like I was pretty consistent about it and realized, oh, I can sort of like amass these, and this will be my first book, you know.
It's a collection of essays.
Yes, yes, and it's basically, you know, we're all stand-ups and we're close to stand-up, and it's kind of like some things are like people need to hear this, but it's not exactly something I can do on stage, especially in American comedy clubs where people are ordering drinks and there's check drops. Like this isn't quite hard hitting enough, but I think people would enjoy the story. So those kind of things end up being in my blog, and some of them made it to the book.
Did you start in New York?
You know, technically I did. But what happened was I'm from New York. I started in New York and started in Harlem and in the Village a little bit. I was still in college back then. And so I was kind of kicking around, still basically an open micer. And then I moved to Boston because I got a job in Boston. So basically I became a pro in Boston. Like
another great comedy market. So a lot of very
it's a great place to develop. I became
a
pro and a man, quote unquote, a man in Boston, I feel.
Well, those East Coast audiences like New York and Boston, you had to be a gladiator. You had to be good. The audiences are very discerning.
Right.
And all of my heroes came out of that petri dish back there.
Absolutely. And what I love about Boston as New England in general is some people say if you start in the Midwest, the hub is bigger. You know, like if you live in Chicago, for instance, and you start doing comedy, the hub is like maybe a 4-hour circle. Places once you get good enough to be sort of a host or opening act, that's the hub. New England, it's sort of like, because that's where, you know, we populated first, you know, the Europeans populated first. It's basically the hub is a lot smaller. So within everything is an hour and a half, 2 hours max. And what's great about that is you get the city crowd, you get that hip city vibe. And just like an hour less than that, it's like a road room in the middle of, you know, like akin to like what it must feel like to perform in the Midwest. And so you get both of those experiences. I think it makes you a lot stronger. A lot stronger. And the thing about Boston is also the crowds don't. It's a weird thing because so many people, I personally think Boston produces the funniest people, even not even comics, just people in life, like the cab driver, the lady at 7-Eleven, like they're all hilarious. They're all super sarcastic, quick-witted. And when you're on stage in Boston, somehow the audiences, they know you're doing jokes and they're perfectly okay with it. And so that means the comics can go for the kill. Whereas like New York is like that, but you kind of have to make it conversational. So going to Boston was a great place to blend like a conversational style with just murdering with the, you know, really tight written jokes.
Do you think that has to do with how close all those cultures are? The African American, the Irish culture, everybody's jammed into a smaller space up there. And humor is a defense mechanism for lots of minorities up there. Absolutely.
Yeah, you have the Irish humor, the Italian humor, the Jewish humor, and it all blends in kind of really nice. And what's great about Boston is it's still a little repressed. You know, like I tell people in New York and LA, it's kind of like everything goes, right? So if you want to dress like a chicken in LA, you can dress like a chicken. You don't even have to be handing out flyers. You can just be like, this is what I do. I dress like a chicken. No one's gonna bat an eye. Same thing in New York. In Boston, you can't dress like a chicken. So if you want to dress like a chicken or whatever that thing is in you that makes you want to do that, you have to repress that, and it comes up a different way. So all that repression creates like comedy in a sense, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a nice. It's fuel, or it's like alchemy. I don't know. But I was watching your special, Take Note, which is you can stream it. And I did not know this about you, but your mother is 15 years older than you. And I'm wondering, at what age did you recognize that this was something you could leverage?
You know what's crazy is that you know how it is when you go on stage. They want you to write, like, especially when you get to LA. When you're in Boston, you're just up there trying to be funny. You're trying to survive because those Boston guys are so funny. You're just trying to not drop the ball, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Then you come to LA and it's like, you know, what's your 5-minute sitcom set? You know, they want you to bring the situation to the situation comedy, right?
Sure.
And so that joke, I realized I wasn't talking about it that much. I was at the Improv one night and I was like, I really don't have this 5-minute thing. I mean, I have some jokes about myself, but I really don't have this thing. So I kind of like wrote that joke on the fly and then, you know, kind of enhanced it. So it was in that moment where I knew I could, where I, you know, think I'd make it a part of my act. Because I typically don't think to mind those things, not like in such a direct way, only because then you have to sort of like, now you're bringing other people in and are they okay with it? It turns out that's one of my favorite jokes though. So that kind of works.
Yeah. Cause I'm just picturing you as a kid at a certain point, recognizing like, you know, my mom is also a kid. So she better not try and tell me what's up. You know,
I knew it. It's weird. I knew it instinctively. I knew it because of how I would try to test her. You know, like I'm a nice guy, but I think I would push her buttons, and I wouldn't push her younger sister, my aunt. I wouldn't push her button. I wouldn't push my grandmother's buttons, my father's buttons. But something about my mom, she's so kind and tolerant that the little rascal in me would mess with her and try to get her upset, kind of. Which is kind of, I feel bad that I did that. And then she would, you know, back then you could hit kids, but she hit like a girl, you know? So even if she hit me, I would laugh. So it was just all a riot. She would like punch me with this part of her fist. And so I say all of that just to say, like, maybe even as a small child, I understood her youth. I'm not sure, definitely not consciously. And then when I got to be in public school, and she'd come to school, it would always be, that's your mom? And then I like, what are you guys talking about? That's your mom? And a lot of that. Then I started to notice like men who I didn't think they were that much older than me. And they would give my mom the eye.
Okay.
Around 10, 11, 12, and I see guys sort of like hitting on her.
Right.
That's problematic.
That's uncomfortable. Sure.
Right. So, but you know, it's weird. It's like, on one hand, I thought that I sensed that she was young, but on the other hand, I think I've never fully took that for granted. Like I've always acknowledged that in those 15 years, that's 15 years of wisdom of doing things. So I do, you know, try to give her props, you know.
Right.
Do you have brothers or sisters?
I do. Yeah. They're all younger. Like, they're basically 11 years younger than me. And that's the next one is 11 years younger. Then after that, there's a few more. So yeah, it's like a weird thing. I have an only child experience.
Right.
That. I have siblings, but we have a kind of uncle relationship too, because I'm so much older than they are.
Right.
So did you do what many comics do, which is realize that you have power over your parents with your ability to make them laugh? That was the only way I could disarm my mother and father and take them out of their low-grade depression all the time, was to get them to laugh. And I knew that that was the one thing I could use to sort of manipulate their mood to my advantage. Did you have anything like that in your family?
A little bit. With my mom, I would say I had that. But it's even stronger. I saw my mom do that with my grandma. You know, because my grandma, who raised me, was like very kind, very supportive, like just all about me. Everyone will tell you I was her favorite and all of that. But at the same time, she's not a touchy-feely. She wasn't a touchy-feely person. Like, didn't like to be touched, you know, incessantly. You know, she wasn't like crazy with it, but, you know, didn't like too much of that. And had a facade that seemed kind of serious. But my mom could make her cry laughing.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and almost on command, whenever she wanted to, she could do that. And then so that kind of brought me into the fold, and I saw that superpower, and even strengthened my draw to comedy You know, I was making people laugh at school. Then I see my mom, who definitely could have been a comic. And she's very, like, all the qualities I have, she has. And it's just till recently, because for the longest time, I thought, I kind of like had this vision that my dad was super smart, super intense. And I always figured I got my smarts from him and my comedy from my mom. Now I'm realizing it's not that simple. But yeah, I would still say I probably got my comedy from my mom. She just has a very natural timing to her. Very natural.
It's a big victory to make her laugh too, I'm guessing.
It is. But I mean, I can do it. We have such a similar sense of humor. It's really cool to have your tribe. Like you say, you made your parents laugh, you know? You know, I can hear a song in LA and know, oh, my sisters love this song. You know, my mom would song, that kind of thing.
Right.
And her laugh is super important. I think I got by being good in school. Like I offset being bad in school with being, like, I got good grades, but bad behavior.
I don't know. I'm guessing your behavior was more kind of mischievous than bad.
No, I mean, it was that. No, not after grade 6. I think everything was kind of cool, but I'm like my early years. No, it was like I was like fighting every day. You know?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and fighting teachers, and it was not good. But that's the comic in me too, right? The kind of like, I think I'm right, so I'm not going to back down, and then you have to sort of like be right, and how do you demonstrate that you are quote unquote right? And I think comedy came in handy there too, learning how to sort of like disarm people, speak your truth without it being a thing.
And fighting is just another way to gather an audience too.
That's true. That is so true. But I lost too many of those fights. So.
Yeah.
I mean, avoided them. That's where
I mean, they're both weapons, right? So if you learned quickly that the more useful weapon, or the more constructive weapon, if that's not too much of a conflict of interest, but the more constructive weapon is your wits, right?
Who are your stand-up heroes, Dwayne?
Oh, you know, that's a great question. I have so many. I think, you know, I always tell people George Carlin is my favorite.
Me too.
Yeah. Even though, you know, I will concede that like Richard Pryor is the sort of consensus best comic ever. George Carlin is right under him, I think, and he's my personal favorite.
I bet that's why you're so good with language, because that's what I loved about Carlin. There's nobody that did these flights of fancy with interesting words better than him. And I think you and I probably appreciate him for the same reason.
Absolutely. And you know, what's crazy is so much of like what I liked about him, I didn't even understand it until I became a comic, you know, in terms of the language. But I'm also, you know, Eddie Murphy was such a superstar coming up that everyone just gravitated toward him. I think as much as Carlin showed you how to do it, at least me, Eddie Murphy showed you that it could be done, you know, because he was so young and came out the gate so fast.
Right.
But also, like, I love so many guys. Franklin Adai, Richard Jimmy, you know, there's just so many. And then current guys too. Patrice O'Neill, who passed away, was a good friend of mine.
Oh, he was wonderful.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, Bob Newhart, I love his timing. Yeah. And I think, I in the 80s, I was like really, you know, I was younger, but I was like Seinfeld. Like I knew who Jerry Seinfeld was before he had a show, you know?
Yeah.
Like I knew even the guys who were on like Evening at the Improv, I knew a lot of those guys. Still, I didn't think I would be a comic, you know, but when you know guys like on that level, you're really drawn to it, you know?
Talk about the first time you went up. Do you remember that?
I do, yes. First time I went up was in Harlem, New York. And by the way, I've been to, comedy has taken me to the other Harlem as well, the original Harlem in the Netherlands.
Cool.
Yeah, because Harlem is New York, New Amsterdam's. A lot of things are named after Dutch places.
All our names are complete ripoffs. Come on, like New York, like exactly. You can't come up with a whole new name, like New Jersey. No,
right.
That's sad.
I've been to York too.
You've been to York, okay.
So my first time on stage so it was weird. I don't, people don't know the full story. I had a summer job possibility out of Brooklyn, in Seattle, testing software for Microsoft, right?
Wow.
And I just botched the interview. Like, I think back, I know I answered one question wrong. My mom told me to send a thank you letter. I didn't. I could have, because in the thank you letter, I could have been like, oh, I got that one question wrong. So I didn't get that summer job, but I had written down on a piece of paper, like, this is what I'm going to do this summer. I'm either going to work at Microsoft or I'm going to start doing stand-up comedy.
Oh, cool.
And Microsoft even flew me to Seattle. Like, that was crazy. So then I started, I was like, how do I start comedy? I was at a Black Business Expo. Like, I don't know if they still do it. It was like basically a showcase of Black businesses, but it's more for you to, give them your business to cater them or whatever. And there was a comedy club there called the Uptown Comedy Club. And, I walked over and said, how do you go on, And they said, come by on a Wednesday. That's when we have our workshop. They were kind enough to have a little workshop for new comics. And then on a Sunday, you can go up. So basically, I scouted it out for a few weeks. I went there on a Sunday, checked out the show. I went to the Improv in New York. And then probably in 2 weeks, I went to the Uptown Comedy Club on a Wednesday, which was, you had to do that. It was like a mandatory thing. They walked you through it. And then on Sunday, I went up. And the thing is, it was like, I went up on the New Jack segment. So basically, it's not like the Apollo. It's not that crazy. But at the same time, the crowd is encouraged to express if they like you or if they don't like you.
Okay.
Yes.
Those are nightmares that I have, having to do one of those Apollo audiences. I don't know how you do it.
So what happened?
Yeah, well, what tends to happen is you do well your first time, right? Just your energy.
Yeah.
It's like in the cartoons when they step off a cliff and they don't fall because they don't know what gravity is yet, right? So I did really well. And then the next show I bombed, and I tell people that's when you become a comic, after you bomb.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a good bombing because I think the host of the show, I didn't realize, was behind me taunting me. And I think he did that because maybe he sensed the audience wasn't into it. And so he wanted to sort of like, that's what some shows do. They'll disassociate themselves from you. Like, so that way,
it's like high school, just figure out what side you're on so that you're on the winning side.
Right. So that loss that you just took doesn't count for a loss on the overall show.
Sure.
Which I get. But the first time out was a blast. I did like 2 song parodies, and I remember getting off stage and telling someone such a ridiculous statement. I said, I think I'll open up every show with a song parody.
I'm not stuck to that.
But obviously that's not
Seinfeld made a comment that I don't agree with, but you're talking about bombing, so I want to ask you. He said when you have a bad night, it's never the audience's fault. Do you agree with that?
I would say that's a good way to look at it, but no.
For self-preservation, but it's not true.
Yeah, I don't think it's true. I think
you go into one of those places with malfunctioning air conditioning, or there's just been a eulogy on stage, and there are circumstances where you're digging yourself out of -0, and there's nothing you can do. Bill Cosby for 3.5 hours could not pull these people out of a funk. We've all had those.
Absolutely. I think there's something to take from it, but I wouldn't say that it's never the audience's fault. I mean, maybe he means in a sense that given that same situation, if you're put in that same situation again, maybe the next time you'll know what to do. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like I think, and that's why it's so important to listen to your sets, And I tell newer comics who always ask for advice, and my standard stock advice, which it sounds kind of cheesy, but I say record, and listen to every set. Mm-hmm. Because if you do 5 sets and you listen to all 5 sets, it's like you've done 10 sets. So it will expedite your progress. And what I learned by listening to sets is that you never killed as hard as you think, and you never bomb as hard as you think.
Wow.
You know, like every time I listen to a set, sometimes I'll like, if I didn't like it, I didn't like the set, I'm like, oh, I can't even listen to this. And I force myself to listen to it. And then I'm like, okay, it wasn't great, but it was fine. Other times I'm like, oh, that was amazing. Let me listen to it. And then I'm like, okay, it was good. So much of what is happening is based on what you think is happening.
The bad nights last a lot longer than the good nights too. That's the trouble.
Right. You said the bad nights last a lot longer.
The bad nights sting a lot longer than the good nights feel good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But sometimes you have to, like, I think with a good set, I might listen to it and keep it. A bad set, I listen once and I erase it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. So there's always something to learn. Sometimes you don't remember an ad lib and recording, or you tag something, just like instinctively tag something. And so recording it, captures that. You off stage, you got the adrenaline. You're like, oh, what was that thing I said? It really worked. And then you're in the car on the way home. Right. You don't remember what it was. So.
Exactly. And it's always good to listen as close to the set as possible. But I've found that sometimes if I listen to a set I did 4 years ago, that's a really interesting experience too.
Mm-hmm.
Because
wow.
You're listening and you're like talking to you talk like present Dwayne is talking to past Dwayne.
Yeah, you're like, why don't I do that joke anymore?
Right. Or why were you going so fast? Why were you going so slow? What was and what I find too is when I get off stage, it's always like, it's almost like a story, right? There's his side, like one person's side, the other person's side, and the truth. Same thing with the set. Same thing with the set. It's like what you thought was happening versus what was happening. And it's when you listen, you can begin to reconcile those two things.
Yeah. It could also be informed by how sensitive the mic is on your recorder and where you placed it. Like did you put your notes on top of the recording machine?
Right,
or I guess you just use your phone now to record stuff, right?
I do. And it's weird. I just found one of my old tape recorders. Like I started with micro tapes.
Yeah.
Then I went to MP3 recorders. Now it's just my phone. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Go ahead, Weezy.
No, you ask a question, because when you're done with your question, if it is about stand-up, I'm going to move to his zombie book.
Oh, great. I just want to ask you one more thing about stand-up.
Yeah.
I think one of the funniest pieces of material in your Drybar set was talking about going whitewater rafting in New Zealand.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just a beautifully written piece of material. But I want to ask you, were you over there on vacation or were you performing over there as well?
I was performing in Australia.
Okay, that's why I brought it up, because you mentioned Franklin Ajay, who I've known for years and been a friend of for 35 years. Yeah. He loves performing in Australia so much that I guess he goes over there like 6 months a year. He's got a house over there. Really? And it's such a rich comedy environment, which it seems so interesting to me with the cultural differences and everything, but he loves it over there and he's been doing that for years.
Yeah, Australia is a really interesting place. I've been there twice, and both times I was there for like 3 weeks to a month, mm-hmm. And I liked it both times, but I left the first time I went, I left thinking I could not, I left thinking, oh, this is great. I'll come back. I don't think I could live here. The second time I left thinking I could live here,
Yeah.
It's sort of like, it's similar to America, I guess it's kind of like maybe what America would be if we had stayed under English rule another 50 to 100 years.
Pretty much. And we're a little more tropical.
Right. Exactly.
But did you have to change any of your cultural stuff for it to make sense over there?
A little, not too much, because, our culture and our movies and everything, just everyone gets our stuff, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I call the elevator the lift, and then, which I like that because it's only one syllable. And then when I come back, I have to go back to elevator because I have a joke about being in an elevator, and it's just
you're wasting time.
Yeah,
Too many
four syllables. It's ridiculous. Right. I don't have that kind of time.
But Australia is great. It's. I will say this before you go on, Louise. It's not as It's not as like out there as you thought. Like you think Australia, you think of like the guys being like wild, these like really strong wilderness kind of guys.
Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah, Crocodile Dundee, or you think it might be a wee bit lawless because of the history of Australia being a place where they sent criminals. But actually, I think because of that, it's way more regimented. Like things close early, and like everyone's moving like they're late, but they're all on time. It's such a weird, like if you go to a store, like you go to a deli that closes at 6 p.m., like after 5, you can't get anything.
Wow.
They're winding down.
Right. So everyone's sort of like, I was there in October, right, Fritz? And I was there in October, and they were having Christmas parties at some of the shows, just to get it out of the, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to go there, but Franklin loves it. And I guess he's got a house and goes back, and somehow he's built his following down there.
Yeah, I've heard that. And yeah, he's big down there. And it's really cool. I mean, the whole country, believe it or not, only 25 million people, and it's basically the same size as the continental US.
Yeah, just no one lives in the middle because it's really dry. So now you've written 2 books, Hot Chocolate for the Mind, but both these you can find on Amazon. And the second book is called Zombie Run. And I'm reading the reviews and I'm reading, what people are saying about the book. And so I learned something new. So apparently zombie lit is a thing and there are rules. So can you explain?
Okay. The guy I wrote this book with, my friend Koji, he's a longtime collaborator. We've written many things together, usually more like comedy kind of things. So he's the zombie expert. But I think when you talk about zombie rules, I think it's sort of like you can pick a movie. You can pick basically one, how do people become zombies? You have to sort of establish that.
Okay.
How is it sort of transferred, and how do they get out of their zombieism? Usually it's death, but some movies have other ways that people can, stop being zombies. So I think.
But what is it different in every book or movie how you become a zombie?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, basically, you got the traditional zombies are people who are risen from the dead.
Right.
You also have the virus kind of thing.
Okay.
Those are the 2 main tracks. This book started as a movie idea that I had, and I called it Zombie Run. Now the book is so different than the movie idea, but I'm glad. I mean, Koji convinced me to write a book with him instead. So it's called, but we kept the title, and basically Zombie Run. I got the idea in Toronto. Okay. I was in Toronto doing shows and a bunch of zombies ran by me. Right. Yeah. But what it was like a 5K, and it was like
those were just Canadians. I don't.
Right. So it was a 5K with people dressed as zombies, and I just, most of the movie ideas I have are kind of high concept. So I thought, wouldn't it be crazy if like real zombies infiltrated this sort of like jokey zombie run, because then no one would be able to tell who the real zombies are versus fake. And so our book is completely not about that, but it is called Zombie Run. And basically the history, when we meet the 2 characters, Hanson and Alicia, they, the zombie run has already happened. So basically the book starts 10 years or 5 or 10 years after there was a zombie run in Queens. And that exactly is what happened. Real zombies infiltrated.
Okay.
And when we meet them 10 years later, basically Hanson is a human being pretending to be a zombie
for the sake of survival.
For the sake of survival.
Yeah.
Alicia's doing the same thing, except she's aware that other humans exist and they meet in secret. Hanson does not know. He doesn't know other humans exist at all. And so we took some liberties, like basically the zombies go back to work. We created a world where it's set in the future. Everything is automated, like trains just run. They don't need, energy is cheap. Trains run. They stop at every stop. So when we become zombies, everything is still doing what it does. And after everyone's a zombie and the zombies don't know that anyone else exists, they all just go back to work. So basically, whatever you were doing the last day of your human life, you kind of do it, but you don't really do it. So like, basically they go to work and they just kind of go like this on the keyboard. You know, it's,
Okay.
they're pretending in essence. So zombies have the sort of mental capacity of a 2 or 3 year old.
Oh.
And so now at the same time, if they spot a human being, they go full scary zombie. So that's why Hanson, our hero, he has to go to work, because other than if he doesn't, he'll be sort of figured out. And when we meet him, he's had it up to here. He's like, he figures I'm the only human being left. I should just take my own life. But he has a funny suspicion that this one girl he's seeing is not a zombie, and she's like him, and he doesn't know how to figure that out. Eventually, they find each other and they find that they're both not zombies, and then she introduces him to this whole other world of human beings. We call them the 1%ers.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of,
and they're underground,
right?
Yeah.
And so basically, it's a whole year from one zombie run to another zombie run, because
cool.
The zombie runs still happen.
Yeah.
Keep doing them as zombies. So
it's tradition, you know?
Yeah, we took some liberties. But the good thing about it is Koji and I both got busy, but this book is intended to be the second book in a series. So there's like the first book of really fleshing out how they became zombies and all of that stuff. And then the next book to figure out, you know, how can the human beings win? And I don't want to give them all.
I assume there's a lot of metaphors involved, but how do you explain the popularity of zombie lore?
You know, Koji is so great at fielding this question, but I am kind of okay because of him. Like, I think what it is that when people feel a sense of like, people feel like they're not connected or they've lost control, I think those represent spikes in zombie lore and people sort of like being, you know, infatuated with all things zombie. And I think in our current sort of situation, I just think, people feel not as connected. And I think people feel like zombies already. And so the zombie experience kind of describes what people are feeling. And we play with that too. So basically, you know, zombies love looking at their phones. In our book, zombies laugh when other people are laughing. So these are little tricks that you can do to, you know, escape becoming a zombie, knowing how they behave. And I just think right now we're more connected than ever, but at the same time, we're like the least connected we've ever been. So I think that's all that plays a role in people being infatuated with zombieism.
Fascinating.
It's either zombies or QAnon. I'll go with zombies. Man.
Yeah, I heard you guys talk about QAnon too. That was really cool how you broke it down.
I'm obsessed with QAnon. So I watched over the weekend. I didn't put this in my recommendations today because I had so many lined up already, but there's a Vice 3-part special on QAnon, you know, which you can find. And my husband and I binged the whole thing. We were just going to watch the first episode and I was like, no, I have to know more. So because apparently like Mike Flynn is involved at the highest levels.
Oh my God.
So it's like maybe starts as some kind of LARP, like a live action role play, but it's like really not a usual LARP where everyone's in on it. It's a LARP where only the guy pretending to be like high level clearance is in on it. Right. And he starts manipulating all these people and it catches fire. And that's when the high level people want in. And that's what I think happened. You know,
but I'll tell you, I don't, you know, I don't have, my brain's not big enough to wrap my head around this, but I think it's this guy who maybe works at H&R Block. And at night he goes and he does what Dwayne does and his writing partner said, what kind of a scenario, how out there can we make a scenario and still get people to believe in it? How about if we pose all Democrats as Satan worshiping, pedophile,
baby drinkers,
baby drinkers? How about that? It's not just one absurd idea. It's 3 packed into one. And people buy this. It just defies logic. I don't
doesn't
get
actually, Fritz, because here's the thing. If these people have just gone through their lives like, I hate these kind of people, I hate these kind of people, and I hate these kind of people, and I don't want to have to apologize for it. But, I guess I can't say that at the garden party or whatever because it's not PC. And then all of a sudden someone says, oh no, not only is it okay to hate those people, you have to if you want to be a patriot, because those people are eating babies.
Yeah, well, right there is where I hit the wall going 90 miles an hour.
Well, but I mean,
when does reason
not only have
take
you given
over?
them permission to be a racist, you're telling them it's their patriotic duty.
Yeah, well, I'm still that I can't suspend my disbelief long enough to buy into that. I just
trying to
can't
tell
believe.
you how it happens.
Oh, okay. Well,
Right. Well, it
It's just-
becomes a thing of like, and anything, if you say anything against it, then they've gotten to you, so like,
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Now we're talking about it. Yes. So they win. I get
Oh,
it.
yeah, no, what I mean is you can't disprove it because like, even
Oh, you
if,
can't prove a negative. Sure.
right. So if a Republican who's against it, people go, oh, they must have gotten to him, he's a part of it now or whatever the case.
Right.
You can't prove it
yeah,
negative.
but it's the Nostradamus theory. How far down the road can you kick these proclamations that don't come true to where people go, this is bullshit? How can Nostradamus was wrong about the end of the earth every 100 years for 3,000 years. When do people say, I have some questions about this?
He only has to be right once.
Yeah, well, he ain't been right so far. And when do you lose interest?
There's, yeah.
And
Anyway,
it's
it
one
has
of those
nothing
things
to do
where
with this.
babies, I mean, I know we're a first world country, quote unquote, or whatever, but every baby I know is with their parent 24 hours a day. And so that means the only babies they could be eating are some kind of third world babies.
Right.
They may be eating.
That's
like,
interesting.
They could be eating zombie babies
Yeah, there you go.
because all of the zombies act like babies anyway, as you just told us. Well, I don't know why they're not talking about like, oh, this child has gone missing or this, or, maybe they are. I don't know. I'm not interested enough to go to any of these message boards, but I do find things like Scientology and just religion, the origin of any kind of belief system or ideology that's deeply felt and is fascinating to me, like how the human mind works, what gets you through the day.
But what all those things have in common, and you're exactly right, Scientology, fringe religions, but all of those things, in order to get traction, have to have a modicum of truth. There has to be one or two elements that draw you in saying, this might be true. But the whole QAnon thing is so outrageous, there's no sort of lily pad of reality you can step on to get into the rest of it. It's just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, it really is. Kathleen Madigan has a great joke. I don't want to butcher it, but she said something about her dad was talking about Mormons, and she pointed out, well, they have their beliefs just like, Christians believe this, that, and the third, and so she compared it, and she was like, what makes it better than Christianity? Christianity has all these kind of weird beliefs, and he said, yeah, but Christianity started before television, so.
That's interesting.
That's so funny that, it's sort of like, we weren't around when, the other major religions started. And it's, I think some of us accept it like as absolute truth. Some of us accept it as, okay, this is sort of a general way to live and treat people,
right.
that kind of thing. But when you see a whole new religion or fringe thing start right before your eyes, and it's like
crazy.
Yeah, it's like the difference between a textualist and what's the other thing with the originalist and a textualist. Like, well, all right, so what I get, these are parables and these are, like Aesop's fables. These are lessons to live by. And, but maybe this didn't exactly happen. And then there are people that just like actually literally believe that everything in the Bible is the absolute gospel, which I guess is a term that originates with the Bible, correct? The Gospel of Mark, the Gospel of Luke. So, the word gospel means like, oh, if Mark wrote it down, it must have happened, even though all of their gospels are slightly different, correct? And they're also
they're 300 years after the death of Christ.
Right. And none of them were his apostles. None of them were the guys that hung out with him. They were all guys that just heard about him. And a lot of people think that they were written by the guys that hung out with him, and they actually weren't. The religion kind of takes a few hundred years to bubble and, take hold. So yeah, all of that stuff is, at Easter, I always watch all the history specials about Jesus, because I'm just fascinated by why we believe what we believe and what matters to us and why. I think.
And the story of him was bent for political reasons too. Constantine wanted to make Christianity the religion of the Roman Empire, but he didn't like all of it. For instance, they completely subjugated the role of women, and all these things are twisted for the desires of history.
The best part is, or my favorite part is, that Christianity starts out as a version of Judaism where you're Jews, but you believe that the Messiah has in fact come. It's like, okay, you're Jew. Jesus was a Jew, and all of the people who followed Jesus were Jews, and the people who believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Or
they called him Rabbi too,
right? And so they just believe, well, we're Jews, but we just believe that the Messiah has come. And so it was hard for them to sell their religion, because they were first pagans, like all over the Roman Empire. They were pagans. So in order to become a Christian, you had to first become a Jew, which meant you had to get circumcised. So they were like, they had a meeting and they were like, in the brochure, this isn't selling. And I would like to propose that maybe, we're not part of Judaism. We're our own thing. And then, you can keep down there however it was. And like, people are like, sign me up. That's good. I like the new terms. So yeah, there's all kinds of interesting stuff to read about. But Dwayne, I want to get back to you for a moment. Tell us where folks can find you online and what you would like for folks to learn and discover if they're going down your media path.
I'm Dwayne Perkins on Instagram. That's DWAYNE Perkins. Funny DP on Twitter. Dwayne Perkins on YouTube. I'm mostly active on Instagram, and then I kind of funnel that into Facebook and Twitter. My book, Hot Chocolate for the Mind, is on Amazon, as is my book, Zombie Run. Also, people can listen to my stuff on, your Spotify's and things like that, or satellite radio. And my specials, I have 2 Drybar specials at this point, and one special called Take Note that's currently streaming. So people can sort of, and I'm in the content race like everyone else. So I'm also putting out little videos and things like that on my Instagram. So if they follow me there, I think it'll be a good place. If they're on Instagram, follow me there. On Facebook, it's a good place to sort of stay, keep abreast with all I have going on.
Excellent.
You're a really talented person.
Yes,
I
Thank you.
think we're going to be hearing a lot about you for a long time.
Thank you. I hope so. As are you. And I'm loving the hair. It's so nice. Oh my God. I'm marveling at it. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's a thing of beauty. All right, here come the closing credits. We would love for you to join us online on Instagram and Twitter, where we are at Media Path Pod, and on Facebook, where we are Media Path Podcast. You can find full episodes with all kinds of bonus visual content on our YouTube channel, Media Path Podcast. We would love to know what media you have been enjoying, so you can contact us at our social media or email us at mediapathpodcast@gmail.com. I want to thank our guest, Dwayne Perkins. So thank you so much for joining us. Our team includes Dina Friedman, Francesco Demanda, John Maddox, Sharon Bellio, Bill Filipiak, Thomas Hubble, Alex Gilroy, and you. I am Louise Palanker here with Fritz Coleman, and we will see you along the media path.